Hello and welcome to Check 1 2, where we give you the lowdown on testicular cancer by speaking to survivors, advocates and supporters of testicular cancer awareness here at the world famous Podcast Studio Glasgow. Today we have a remarkable guest, Andy Hood, joining us. Andy is a testicular cancer survivor who has turned his battle with cancer into a powerful mission to break the taboos surrounding men's health. Not only has Andy faced his diagnosis head on, but he's also an avid ultramarathon and endurance runner. Using his athletic achievements to raise awareness and inspire others, join us as we delve in to Andy's journey from his initial diagnosis to his incredible feats in the world of endurance sports, and learn how he continues to champion the cause of testicular cancer awareness. Ladies and gentlemen, Andy Hood.
So, I'm Andy Hood. Thanks very much indeed for inviting me on the podcast. It's great to be here. I'm a testicular cancer survivor, diagnosed in 2021, and no doubt we'll talk more about that. And for my sins, I'm an ultra and endurance runner, which has taken a whole new meaning since diagnosis, and has definitely brought a new platform to being able to talk about something that's pretty difficult to talk about.
Yeah, no, definitely. And thank you so much for agreeing to come on as well. It's always great to get, guests from all walks of life, all types of interests and on all areas as well. So it's much appreciated for you taking the time to speak to me tonight. I suppose that the thing for me is, what were your initial signs and symptoms back in 2021 that led you to seeking medical attention at that time?
It's a really interesting question, and I've watched the video on your website around around your diagnosis and a bit of pain. People getting talking about getting a bit of pain, but I had none at all. I had no pain at all, and it was, for me, it was something that triggered me to check. I was 48 years old, and I don't mind openly admitting that I had never checked myself in those 48 years. I'd been watching the Grand Tour with two of our three boys. We love Clarkson, Hammond and May when they're just, joking around, doing some daft stuff, and they were out racing three cars around a track, and I think they were trying to see whether the need to go to the toilet would make them faster. So they were sitting at a table drinking, I think, 3 pints of water, and they were just talking around, needing to go to the toilet. They're talking about, not being able to go through the night, and it turned to prostate cancer, and someone mentioned testicular cancer. And I had come back from a beautiful run. It was only a couple of weeks after I'd watched that. I'd come back from a beautiful run. It had been a June night, a really balmy, beautiful June night, perfect running. I'd gone out to an old rail trail, and I jumped in the shower as I came back, and the thought went through my mind. I thought, maybe I should just check. I never have. And my right one all seemed fine and normal. My left one seemed totally different. In fact, it had shrunk to about the size of a marble and gone rock solid. So, and I had no pain, no other symptoms apart from that. So it was just the pure reminder of something as daft as watching a TV show that triggered me to say, hey, maybe I should do this.
And that's always the best way, isn't it? It's always that one thing that triggers you. And my experience, of finding mine, really, came through one of my friends actually having a bit of an issue, and then me going, oh yeah, I felt a bit of pain down there, and then finding the Cahonas stuff. So yeah, it just takes one thing, especially like us when we never checked before the time we found it. So it's quite incredible. So after you...
And how old were you when you found that?
I just turned 30. So yeah, I was 30 when I found mine. So it was just one of those weird kind of serendipitous almost thing type situations that happened as well. Yeah. But yeah, I found that, and then went and got my morcondectomy and then my treatment. So it was interesting as well, that it's something that, again, you're not really aware of growing up. You're not talked about it. You know, you must have been the same. And then just that one thing, you know, you're sitting watching Jeremy Clarkson essentially talking bollocks to to make you go and check your own, you know.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
He is good at talking bollocks.
it definitely is. It definitely is. I wish he'd come on board and talk about testicular cancer, you know, as an advocate.
Well, remind me of that a little bit later on in the podcast. There might be a way of making that happen.
Yeah. So when you found that there was actually that quite a dramatic change in your testicle, obviously, you know, feeling that change in size, that firmness. What were your initial thoughts when you found that? How did you feel? What went through your head? Did you think testicular cancer as well at that point, or was it just it could be something different and not worry yourself in that way?
Just a really weird thing to talk about now because I remember coming out the shower and something inside of me just said to me, Andy, you've got cancer.
Right.
And I had no evidence to that at all. Was I nervous about going to the doctor and talking about it? Yeah, absolutely. Do us blokes ever talk about this stuff? No, of course we don't. Do I really fancy dropping my pants in the doctor's office? Not particularly. Not when his office overlooks a housing estate that I'm perfectly aware of. So I'm thinking, no, I don't really want to do that in your office. But there were a lot of thoughts that went through my mind. I think denial was the biggest one. I was like, no, it could be a million other things. I did the worst thing that we should ever do, which is I jumped on Mr. Google and decided to look at Dr. Google and see what Dr. Google would tell me. And it told me it could be lots of different things. My wife, when I told her, was pretty convinced that it was probably something more serious than I was making out. And I still don't know whether today it was a bit of bravado with me saying, yeah, no, I'll be fine, or whether that little trigger inside of me said, yeah, Andy, you've got cancer, was something I just didn't want to bring to the fore of my mind because I knew what the outcome could potentially be.
Yeah, it seems quite a common way of thinking, you know, for the amount of kind of the podcast that we've done and speaking to other guys who have had it does seem that bravado thing of, right, it could be nothing, but I'll go and get checked, and it's almost like your own internal defence mechanism, isn't it?
I would agree, and I think particularly for us men, we're not great at talking about these sorts of things. We're not brought up with the same conversations as I think ladies are. I think the women are much more open.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, we're talking about it. There's much more conversation around breast cancer. There's much more conversation around cervical cancer and having smear tests. I remember writing a podcast writing a blog post not long after I'd had my operation, and I think I opened it by saying, "When did you last sit down the pub with your mate over a pint and say, hey, I've just had a check on my balls. When did you last do yours?"
Yeah.
Never.
Never
We
ever.
don't have those conversations. So I think the bravado is definitely there, and I think that drives the fear that we have as men and the reticence that we have as men to go and have that conversation with our doctor. And I think you delayed your own appointment, didn't you?
I did, yeah, I did, and I think I've said it a couple of times, but I always say it was 2 weeks. It wasn't 2 weeks. It was probably about a month and a half, maybe even 2 months. I delayed it for. So, again, that fear, that uncertainty, and scared of what the outcome could be more than anything, you know.
Yeah.
And did you?
And
On you
go
go.
on.
No. I was just going to ask, did you delay your own appointment at that time as well?
No, I didn't. I just decided that this was something I definitely needed to do something about, and I made a phone call to my GP surgery the following morning, and within the space of a few days, I was in with the GP, and it was a whirlwind from there. Guy, my GP, made me feel very relaxed. He made me feel like it was just the most normal thing in the world, you know, standing there in front of me, having them in his hands, and just, holding a conversation to make me feel like, hey, do you know what? This isn't anything uncomfortable. This isn't unusual. This is something you do lots of times in your career, and he was very skilled at making me feel at ease. He referred me to the sonographer. I had an ultrasound a few days after that, and again, him, guy called Neil, just and made me feel so at ease and so relaxed about what was happening. Kept me informed, told me everything he was doing. And I remember as I finished with the sonographer, Neil said to me, "When are you seeing your GP next?" And I said, "GP will give me a call once he's got the scan results." I said, "When will that be?" And he said, "Oh, that will be before you leave my room. That will be on his desk."
Wow.
And I thought, wow, modern tech, that's great, isn't it? And I was just in awe of the way in which the world goes, because I remember, being 10 years old and breaking my arm and sitting in A&E for donkey's hours and waiting for an X-ray to come out and thinking, it'll probably be about 3 weeks until he gets the result. I remember going home talking to my wife and said, "This is what's happened, and a GP is going to have the results this afternoon." And she just looked at me and said, "If you don't think this is cancer, you are kidding yourself."
Right.
Because that conversation, I think, really did reinforce the message that they know what they were looking at.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the thing, you miss little conversational cues to make you aware. It certainly happened to me. When I went to the sonographer and got it done, I had this whole palaver beforehand that was amusing, to say the least. But when she said to me at the end, like, I think you're going to have to go back and speak to the consultant, it never twigged that
No.
there was something wrong. I just assumed that was the next step, and then you're like, oh, okay, it actually is cancer, and you knew that just by what you were seeing. So yeah, it's funny, these
But
things.
I think in a lot of ways that's the skill of the medical professionals that you're with. They don't alert you to what they're finding. They're very adept at making it feel like this is a very natural thing. This is just part of the process that you're going to be going through. And I'm not going to alarm you. You're not going to go out of my office feeling concerned or feeling alarmed. Actually, you'll go out of my office feeling informed, and you'll go out of my office feeling comfortable and with everything that's gone on today.
And with your kind of lifestyle, were you doing like ultra and endurance running before your diagnosis, or is that something that came after?
That came after. So
Right.
I've been a runner for many years. I was running up to marathon distance before I was diagnosed. Being out the shoes was tough. That was one of the toughest things, was knowing that I was going to be taken out of my running shoes. I was mid-training for an event. I was mid-training for a run from home, which is in North Devon, running down to Land's End on the southwest coast path. That's a 170-mile run with about 28,000 feet of elevation gain. So it's a pretty tough run. I wasn't going to do that all off the bat. I was going to do that across several days. But being out the shoes really crystallized and opened a door, I think, more than anything else. Opened a door that I don't think would have opened if I hadn't gone through testicular cancer. I laid there in the bed after the orchidectomy and before the chemotherapy, and I said, I've got a decision to make laying here. And my decision is, I can either let this affect me, and I can either wallow in a bit of pity and, oh dear, what's this going to mean? And yeah, I'm not kidding you. I don't think there's a day that goes past today where it doesn't cross my mind. I don't think about it, both from a positive and from a concern perspective. But as I lay there, I thought, I can turn left at this juncture, and I can decide that this is really gonna affect me negatively, or I can turn right. And what right looked like for me was rebuilding. And I said, right then, I said, I'm going to rebuild stronger. I'm going to come back as Andy version 2.0. I'm going to do things that I would not have done if I hadn't gone through testicular cancer. And the door that it opens and the opportunity that it's brought to me has just taken me to places that I would never have imagined. It's led to conversations I would never have had with people. It has led to other people checking themselves. My inbox is constantly pings across a week with someone saying, I've read your blog post, I've heard a podcast you were on, I saw your post on Insta, I've checked, I found something, I've gone to see the doctor. And I think that would never have happened unless I had gone through what I've gone through.
And to have that sort of kind of positive impact in the world, even after you've had something, you know, that people would consider negative, must be a great feeling for you just on a personal level anyway.
Oh, it is undoubtedly, and that part of that rebuilding was trying to define what it looked like. And so many people, I think, have said to me, "Oh, you know, don't let cancer define you." And I've got to say that I batted that one back, and I said, "I think it does. It absolutely does define you, but it's up to you to choose the definition."
Mm-hmm.
And how that defines you. And it's defined me in a really positive way. I am talking to people in a way that I wouldn't have spoken about before. Yeah, we mentioned earlier on that, you know, our bravado, I think, stops us from being as open as we should be, both with ourselves physically and mentally. And I think it stops us from being open with our family, our friends, our partners, our mates. But I have never had an awkward conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody I've spoken to about what I've been through, everybody's spoken about how I found it, the operation, the chemotherapy, encouraging them to check. Never have I stood in front of someone who I thought has felt uncomfortable. They've all listened and they've all turned around and said, do you know what I'm going to do tonight? I'm going to check.
Yeah.
And I think that goes to show that perhaps some of the concern that we have about being open about it actually isn't valid. I think people are much more open than we may perhaps give ourselves credit for.
Well, I think the openness to listen to it is there. It's having the voices be confident to speak about it, you know, and having guys like yourself and you know, I include myself in that, to be able to go out and speak to people and have an openness anyway, you know, not be closed off by the cancer experience. Because I agree with you. I think, you know, my cancer did define me, so much so that I now work for the charity, you know, that I say saved my life, you know. So I think it did define me in the positive, and to be able to have these conversations and educate men, you know, in these signs and symptoms. And if we can do that on this such a small scale in terms of like 1-to-1, just down the pub, and then you extrapolate that out to doing talks or social media posts, the conversation's well in it. It's just about getting into these bigger institutions to say, no, people want to listen to this. You
They
just
do.
have to give us the in, you know?
Yeah, they absolutely do want to listen, and I think that they're grateful to listen. In my professional life, I am often in front of a large audience of people talking about things, and I will often bring up about my experience, and yeah, it may be just a flippant comment, and I might just say, you know, at the end of a day, at the end of an event I'm at, look, many of you know my story. Last 3 years, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer. I just want to say, as you walk out this door tonight, whether you're a guy who's got balls, or whether you've got a friend that's got a pair of balls or your partner, just encourage them to go and check tonight.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anyone in that room that doesn't take something away from that. So I think you're 100% right. It's making sure it's fostering those relationships and ensuring that the opportunities are there to have the platform to talk about it.
Yeah. I've only ever had one negative experience, and I don't mean that it was like negative and that there was a negative discussion, but I remember I was doing a talk at a college, and the staff were encouraging not just the pupils to come along, but also staff members to come along as well. And the pupils came along fine. I think there's a certain age group now who is very health orientated, and these things matter to them. But when you kind of start to go up into the age bracket, guys my age and kind of beyond are a little bit more tentative to come to these things. But the person who had organised it had said, I was trying to get staff, nobody would come. She said, I actually had one guy say, I'm not going to that because I'd rather not know. And you're going, I don't understand how that makes sense to you, especially when you know that it's a person who's had testicular cancer coming in to talk to you about testicular cancer. And I understand I'd rather not know, but if you don't know, it kills you. That's the thing, it's not something that's it's not something to be kind of, I don't want to know, because you should. And that's the only kind of negative experience I've had in terms of somebody not wanting to listen to that message. And there wasn't much I could do or say other than, well, I'm there if this needs to happen again, type of thing. But I just found it strange.
And I think people absorb information in different ways and at different times. So whether there was material that you left behind at the time, I would almost be assured that individual, if you left material behind, probably looked at that material.
I hope
Took
so.
it in their own time, in their own way. You're completely right about as you go up through the age groups. I mean, we've got 3 boys. My wife and I got 3 boys. They are we're just about to be in what we call our evens year, so they're going to be 22, 20, and 18. And obviously, as going through it, we keep that conversation alive all the time. In fact, in our little family WhatsApp group, we have Testy Tuesday, which is the first Tuesday of every month, and I stick a funny graphic in there, so you know what you need to do, boys, just get on and do it. But I was on an ultra last year. I was on London to Brighton. It's a 100k ultra, leaves the capital and finishes at the racecourse down in Brighton. And I was around the halfway point, and I had stopped to refill my water bottles and take on a bit of nutrition. And I made the decision, and I've done it on all the ultras since then, the 100Ks I do since then, that I would carry on my backpack a sign, and I would carry the names of those that have been affected by cancer. I put a post out into the group that were organising this ultra and said, this is what I propose to do. And if you want me to put the name of your family or friends or even yours, let me know and I'll put it on there. And I had over 100 names on my backpack. Some of them in remission, some receiving treatment, and some that we remember. And this guy asked me, he looked at my backpack on the table and he said to me, what's that about? And I told him. And I guess he was probably around my age. He may have been a year or 2 older. And he looked at me straight in the eyes and he said, my wife's recently been diagnosed with breast cancer and I don't know what to say to her. I don't know how to talk to her. And we probably spent 20 minutes just chatting away. And I left him just with a message, and I wish I could catch up with him, but I left him with a message and said, maybe you don't need to say really anything at all. Maybe you just need to find that moment when you're home tonight or tomorrow and just say something along the lines of, I'll be there every step. And just leave it. And we had quite a moment. I still get a bit emotional talking about it now. We had 20 minutes and we both cried. But the fact that he had seen something and felt comfortable enough to talk to someone he's never met before and open up in that way, I think was a huge testament to the strength that we do have with him, and a real sharing of caring. We live in a world today where I think it's very easy to hide behind a screen and hide behind messaging. I don't think there's anything more powerful than just a few brief words with another human being.
It is the most powerful thing, and in situations like you had, and with that gentleman as well, and I've had a couple of similar things happen, and the same type of question. What do you say or what do you do? And it's such a difficult one to say to anybody because everybody's going to be different. But like you say, the one thing is that just say you're going to be there. You don't have to do anything but say you'll be there and be there, and it's just about that love and compassion. Yeah. What else does anybody need to know that you're there for them, eh?
I was running from home the other night. There's a chap. I'm very rural where I am, but I'd met someone who lives not a million miles away, and he had cancer in his knee about 10 years ago. Thankfully, they caught it early enough, and he had the tumor removed, and everything's been okay for him. But we stopped and we were chatting, and we were both saying that cancer is always in our periphery. I don't think you can walk through it. You'd have to be pretty blind to it to not see it, not hear about it, not recognize that it is very close to your sphere. Whether that be something in the news, whether that be, and we've had some really, really powerful, I think, news articles over the last few years around various cancers, bowel cancer, for example. But it's only when it comes out of your periphery and visits you personally do you have, I think, a really deep understanding of what cancer actually is, what it really means, how it really affects you, not just the physical effects. I mean, I'm not sure about yourself, but it took me quite a while to get over my orchidectomy. I was in quite a bit of pain for a while. The chemotherapy completely knocked me out. And I am completely recovered from both of those. But it is in my mind every single day.
Oh, I'm the
It will never
same.
leave.
No, it doesn't. I think I was the same as you. The orchidectomy. There was the operation went well, but I had lots of complications afterwards. I had a hematoma, my wound dehisced, I had sepsis, I had avian flu, all within the space of going through chemo. And the mental impact that had, as well as just the physical. But yeah, and there was a bit of me when, I was speaking to Richie, the CEO of Cahonas, when he was talking about maybe taking a member of staff on. And I kind of thought, oh, am I going to get asked? The ask never came. I had to go back and say, I want to interview for this job. But when it kind of came up, I did have this thing of, and just circling back to, what we were saying earlier about how it defined you, I was scared of being dragged in by like having had cancer. And being pulled back into, the fact that I go back into the beats and to give her boxes and things like that. I wondered how that was going to affect me. And actually, it's been more cathartic than it has been damaging, thankfully, and it's these sort of experiences that lead you to kind of go, actually, you can find strength in something so negative, and the relationships around you can only grow from that as well. Because I don't know about you, but my mindset changed, and I've talked to a couple of guys who have went through it, and even you could be the most positive person anyway, but there was something else that just added something extra, I think.
Yeah. Oh, I completely agree. I think it unleashes, as I said earlier on, it opened a door that would definitely not have been opened before for me. And I remember making that decision that what that would look like. And for me, I, I wanted to change my running. I was very much like, okay, this is one opportunity. I'd never asked for cancer to visit me in the first place, so I have no plans on inviting it back into my life. But I clearly can't control that. So if I can't control that, if I have to just let that be, then I want to make the most of everything else that I do within my life. And I've always been someone who wants to achieve. I've always pushed the envelope, and I've always wanted to achieve. And so for me, that was moving into ultra distance and endurance running, and it's taken me to places around the world that I would never have imagined that I would end up running in. Last August, I ran around Mont Blanc, which was just the most perfect landscape to run in, and I found quite an emotional landscape to run in as well.
Yeah.
But it's making that decision. It's making that decision to say, what does that look like for me? How will I use that experience? And I knew I also wanted to talk about it, but you can knock on someone's door and say, hi, I'd like to talk to you about testicular cancer, please. I'd like to chat to you about, checking yourself, and I'd like to talk about, if you do find something, etc. You'd probably have quite a few doors closed on you if I took that approach. So I use my running as a platform to talk about it. And I will just drop into my posts on social about it every so often. And I know people will pick that up, and it will remind them to perhaps they should be doing something about it themselves, or talking to their partner about it, or their brother, or whoever it is. But also I found that it gave me the impetus to take on charity events, and I didn't want to just join organized charity events. I decided that if I was going to do something, I wanted to design these things myself, and choose the organizations I wanted to raise for, and that will change as each year goes forward. And I designed, I managed to do the Land's End run just about a year after I'd originally planned to do it.
Right.
I'd originally decided to do it for the Alzheimer's Society, because my mum had lost her last sibling, Auntie Claire, and Claire had dementia for many, many years, and sadly passed away. And my mum took that hard, so I thought I'll do something really hard, and I raised for the Alzheimer's Society, but I had to put that on hold. Although I did negotiate with the urologist. I do remember sitting in the urologist's office when he said to me, look, Andy, you're going to need an orchidectomy, and this is what's going to happen, and we want you on the operating table in 48 hours' time. And I went, I'm mid-training for a run to Land's End in September. Could we just wait until after then?
They're like, no,
It didn't
slap.
it didn't get a very positive response. So I had to show up that, but I did it just about a year or so afterwards. And in the end, I did Young Minds, because I realised that we have a real mental health challenge, I think, in this country, and I appreciated that what I was going through was as significant mental hurdle as it was a physical one. And Macmillan, and also for the Alzheimer's Society. And as I was running to Land's End, I had a top on with those logos on. The number of people that would stop and ask, it just prompted conversation. It was a conversation starter. And I was coming down a big hill one day, and there was a young lady hiking up the other side, and she stopped me and asked about what I was doing, because she'd noticed the logos on my top, and I told her. And we stood again for a few minutes, and she was in her late 20s, and she said a few years ago she had had ovarian cancer, and she would chat away about that experience. I was only about a year or so after my own diagnosis, probably 14, 15 months after my own diagnosis, and I said to her, the biggest thing that I find right now challenging is I know that I've got this sort of 5 years of very close monitoring going on around me. But actually, for me, that's a constant reminder. I'm always waiting for something. I'm waiting for the results of blood, so I'm waiting for the results of a scan. And she said she felt like that for the first 2 years. And she said, and then it just becomes part of what you do. So those conversations were fantastic. And that door open, those conversations would never have occurred. That type of running that I pivoted into would never have happened unless, as I said earlier, I had gone through what I'd gone through. And so it does. It's about how you reframe that and how you take that and use that experience in your life. And I will stand in front of anybody, and
Yeah.
I will talk about this and encourage others to do the same.
Yeah. It is amazing as well, like when you put your mind to it, because of like a testicular cancer diagnosis and what you do with that after. Like you say, look at where you've been, like the conversations you've had, the parts of the world that you've got to go to through like your own determination because of that diagnosis. Again, going back to, my own experiences, my wife always laughs because, I joined Cahonas and I just got to geek out. I would, reach out to Football Manager, and we got into Football Manager. I done a talk at Celtic Football Club and Glasgow Warriors, and you meet all these people and you're going, this would never have happened if I hadn't had testicular cancer. So it's that weighing the balance of negative and good, and I think I've had much more positive come out of it than the negative aspects of that as well.
Do you ever find yourself stopping and thinking sometimes and saying, where would I be if this hadn't have happened to me?
All the time. Yeah. And it's an interesting game to play with yourself. You obviously do it as well. It's like, what, I was working in the NHS, so would I still be there? How happy would I be within that type of work? So, what are the kind of things that you think about when you think to have that thought?
Well, mine, I think I always come back to the running and where that's taken me and the people that I meet. So one of the charity runs that I designed and took on, I've done two biggies so far this year. In January, I did a 24-hour treadmill run at the gym where I have my strength coach, which is the hardest thing I've ever done. 24 hours on a treadmill. I do not encourage anyone to try that. But the other one I did was I thought, I want to do something fun and I want to combine it with something I love. So I love running and I love donuts. So I thought, I wonder where all the Krispy Kreme stores are in and around London.
Yeah.
So I got all the addresses and I mapped them out on Google Maps, and it just ended up with this perfect, just over 30 miles. So it was, I called it the 50K, but actually it was more like 60K, starting just by the Olympic Stadium in Stratford, where the 2012 Olympics were held, and finishing at Canary Wharf. And I visited 21 Krispy Kreme donut stalls on the way. The team at every single store was phenomenal. The energy, the atmosphere, what that brought to me and what that brought to their day. What I didn't know until I was about 5 or 6 stores in, and someone told me, I met a regional manager there. He said, we've got our own internal WhatsApp group here at Krispy Kreme. And you are the star in this group. Everybody's saying, he's been to my store, he's been to my store, he's on his way to yours, he's going to be there shortly. And I'm thinking, that didn't just bring something to me that day. That brought something to them in their working day, which they're going to talk about, they're going to remember, something very different for them. So it doesn't just, would I have done that if I hadn't gone through testicular cancer? No, 100% I wouldn't have done that. No way.
Yeah. It's incredible, and I when I was doing the kind of research and Facebook stalking you and seeing that your Krispy, I was like, what an amazing idea to do, and I was thinking, because years ago I seen it was one of my friends tried to on Strava draw a penis while with his run, and I thought maybe Andy could do one that looks like bollocks and call it the bollocks run, and have it mapped out in Strava to look like a big pair of balls round London.
Well, you set me a challenge, and I love a challenge. That is, and actually with the mapping apps that we've got today, it's significantly easier to map that sort of stuff out and do it. Although I do get lost every so often, so you might get some. We might have to do a bit of photoshopping. Yeah, I might go straight hair. Yeah, it might look a bit strange by the time we finish, but I could definitely take that on. I mean, one of my biggies for next year, and you were talking about trying to get Jeremy Clarkson on, and he polarized his opinion, but I think his latest series has definitely opened him up to a whole new audience. And I think if you look at his, particularly, I think if you look at Diddley Squat's farm shops posts, you see the age of people that are engaging now with him, which again I think is a very different audience that he probably had at Top Gear and a very different audience he had over at Grand Tour.
Yeah,
but that's really good, because I think that audience is one that we would want to talk to, about this. I think that's a really good audience to get this message to. So one of my ones next year is for 9 marathons in 9 days, but in a different town or city, and it's going to spell out the name of a charity up here, very close to where I live, that do a lot of work with chemotherapy patients. Started by a lady called Lisa Wallace, who had breast cancer, diagnosed with breast cancer just for her 30th birthday. She lived for about 12 years before sadly passing in 2021. And she developed these boxes of kindness that are gifted to cancer patients at their first chemotherapy treatment, for really thoughtful and useful items. And they're called Chemo Hero. So I'm planning on running a marathon in a town or city that begins with each one of those letters, to spell out Chemo Hero, and go right across the UK and get as many people that have, cancer has touched their life to either come and see me or walk a mile with me or walk half a mile with me or run for a little bit with me or do whatever they want. One of them is the O, of course, Chemo Hero. There's two of them. Well, I'm seriously contemplating of doing that one, starting in Oxford and going to Diddley Squat. And I'm probably going to buy the burger, because the burger looks fantastic. You've got to have the best burger there. So maybe there's an opportunity to get him to get on this show with you.
I'd be much appreciative, and I think his gin's pretty dash good as well. So the Diddley Squat gin's quite nice. So
yeah. Maybe I'll put some in my backpack for you.
Yeah, I just say you should just put it in your own, like if you've got one of those camel things, as you're running.
Yeah.
As you're staggering.
That might make the next 10 miles go quick.
Yeah, you're like, I can't remember doing that run. But yeah, that'd be such what a great idea as well to change it up, because you have all these different types of runs that happen, and I think when the way that you're doing it, and there's like almost a theme to it in terms of how you're going around it and the charities that you support, I think it's incredible. And I think what a cool way to kind of, do that as well, for Chemo Hero. I think that's awesome. We actually, this year, we started doing a similar thing, and it's like we've got a You've Got This box. And it's basically just it's filled with just all this stuff that Richie had done his research, and then obviously had input from other testicular cancer survivors like myself to go, it would have been great if we had this or this, and I think that's the thing, it's like to be able to have these kindnesses and see the amount of guys who have reached out to us since, it's not the landslide that you think, because again, guys are really hesitant to kind of reach out and say, I got this, thank you. But the fact that they've got them, and the ones that do, they've been really appreciative. So it's a great thing, because we're even though we're white males, we are still overlooked when it comes to health in that way.
And I think it's really important that we're starting to see these boxes crop up in other areas of the country. I mean, Chemo Hero can only do so much here up in North Devon predominantly. It's really good to see that very similar boxes are being gifted, because it is really important. I remember, as I think you probably do, my first chemotherapy treatment. I remember just sitting there, and you go through all the tests initially, check your heart and everything else, and make sure you're okay to take it. And I thought, okay, I know I've got lots of family, and I know I've got lots of friends that are probably thinking about me today and, considering what I'm going through. But right now, I feel vulnerable and I feel lonely.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter. Somebody could have come up to me and said, you're not alone. It doesn't matter. We're here. It would not have landed that day. I felt deeply lonely and very isolated. So I think if someone comes up, particularly around when you're having the treatment, and just says, here you go, and you open that up and you see what's in the box, and there are some really thoughtful and useful things in there. I think that's a great thing you're doing.
It's the biggest thing that's kind of came up, and especially this last, maybe 5-6 podcasts, people talking about that, because I really kind of forgot about it until it was mentioned, that loneliness aspect. And it was one of the guys, Chris, who I spoke to, put it really well. He says, it's, you know, you can have all the support in the world, but see when your chemo's at night and you're sleeping all day because you're up all night because of your chemo, and all you've got is your four curtains and instead of the walls, and machines going off and you can't sleep. It's a lonely experience. And as Cahonas, that's what we hope to kind of try and, you know, say that, you know, it might not land that day, but you're not alone, you know, and here's this way contacting us if you need somebody out with, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to make people realise that when they're ready, to be receptive to it, that there is a channel and there is a place and there is somewhere you can go. And I've got no doubt that your podcasts are listened to by so many people, and that one person will then go off and talk about it. That one person will go off and keep creating the awareness, that ripple effect, that dropping that pebble in the middle of the pond and watching those ripples come out, I think is phenomenal. So providing the support and providing a support mechanism alongside that, I think is really important.
Yeah. And I think for us, you know, I've spoke about this in the podcast before, but not everybody is confident enough to engage and reach out to anybody to talk about it. But if they know through getting one of our boxes that this podcast exists, and they can just listen to, they go, oh, listen to Andy's podcast and he talks about this and that, and this is how I'm feeling. Or, you know, I listen to Todd's, or I listen to, all it is doing is showing, without direct conversation, us having these conversations, it's a little sneak peek into somebody who maybe doesn't have the confidence or the ability to talk to anybody. And it allows them to hear that, yeah, we're all the same, we're all going or have been through the same thing, but don't worry, there's positivity to come, you know, and hopefully that shines through when I have these conversations as well.
We are, in a lot of ways, we are more connected today than we've ever been, and we are more disconnected as individuals than we've ever been, because we hide behind a 6-inch screen most of the time. I was in York a couple of weeks ago, and I decided to go for an early morning walk. It was a beautiful morning. I took myself out from the hotel. I was staying at a hotel just outside the city walls. And I wandered out down the river, and then back through a nice, residential area of Victorian terraced houses. And it was a little street where there was a small corner shop there, with your bread, your milk, your newspaper. And on the other side of the road was a guy setting up from what looked like the front of a house. Was setting up a fruit stall. He was unloading everything, getting it all set up. And I thought to myself, how much do we really miss that in life? I bet he knows something about everybody that comes past his stall today, whether that's someone buying an apple on the way to work, or, the lady coming down and buying a few oranges, the guy coming in and grabbing some grapes and a couple of bananas. And you might have a 15 or 20-second conversation with that person. But how powerful is that 15 or 20-second conversation? Yeah. And I think the world we live in today, we've lost so much of that power. We are probably more vulnerable and more alone and more connected than we've ever been. But as I said, I think we're more disconnected, really, from the real world than we've ever been. So having a channel where somebody can feel comfortable, drop a message, drop an email, pick up a phone, receive a box. Those small things are so powerful, so powerful.
Yeah, and it's all you're doing is putting a little bit of positivity back in the world by like yourself being open and talking to people and having that on your backpack before you do that run and these boxes going out. And I think that's all we can do to try and slice through that disconnected feeling that people are having, especially like you say. It's such a great point because we are so connected but disconnected at the same time. And if
Well,
and if this type of thing can help with that, with one I watch, and your story is testament to that. Other guys who've been on, their stories are the same. And it was my wife that put it, because when I was kind of coming up, and thinking about the podcast, and I wasn't sure, me and Richie sat and talked about it. How was the format going to go? And I was really worried about it. And my wife had said to me, she went, Paul, the cancer might be the same, but the people aren't. And it really framed it in a whole different way that, yeah, every guy's they might have certain things that, yep, that happened to me, that happened to me, that happened to me. But the way that we deal with it and the walks of life that everybody has is completely different. And I'm so glad to get to have these conversations as well.
and I think those conversations are really important, that you talk to as many people as possible, because whilst we may have very similar starting and end journeys, if you look at it from a purely scientific perspective, actually, when you look at it from a personal and emotional perspective, the journeys, I don't think, could be more different if you
Yeah.
tried. We all react in different ways. We all take something different away from it. We all experience things in different ways. I remember talking to a lady at the gym, and I was chatting about testicular cancer, and she said to me, "My dad died of testicular cancer because he was too proud to do anything about it."
Wow.
And he just brings it home.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got another journey there, and you've got a journey of not the individual that was directly affected, but a family member that was indirectly affected by it.
Yeah.
And that, I think, that journey is worth listening to.
Oh, definitely. And that must be the case for you then, having three boys, having your youngest, was he 15 when you were diagnosed?
18.
18
Oh
when,
yeah, 15 when I was diagnosed. Yeah,
so,
yeah, he's
I mean,
18 now, so
so
he
that's
would he would have been about 14. Yeah.
right. So right in the cusp of that, like same as my son is now, right in the cusp of that, when you're getting into the stats, the science as such, and to have that positive role model in you to say that, look, boys, I've done this check, I've found it, and I've acted on it as quickly as I could, and they can see the positive impact you've had in the world because of the diagnosis. But as a father of three boys, then reading the stats and how it can be a genetic thing, and it could be that like if your father's had it, you're more predisposed. Have you had conversations with the boys around that, or is that something that you've thought about yourself? Just when even if you've been out a run.
Yeah, running's a very interesting time. You can go very deep inside your mind throughout long runs. Some of my training runs take me many, many, many hours, and when it's just you are very deep inside your own mind. Have we had a specific conversation around that? No, because the conversation is just very much about being open.
Mm-hmm.
Just talk about it. We're very open about our bodies. Talk to me about it. I'm not concerned. You tell me whatever you want to tell me. If you find something, don't feel awkward. You know, we're probably fortunate in some ways because our middle son, who will be 20 this year, has got a lifelong medical illness. He's been, ever since a very young uh, lad, he's been under Great Ormond Street,
Mm.
and still is unofficially. But that's, I think, enabled us as a family to be very open about medical things as well. We've been open with the other two about the challenges he has and what he goes through. He's got an illness which essentially means that he has no immune system, and that puts him at very high risk for
Right.
cancer. All cancers puts him super high risk. So, and he's aware of that, and that's affected him mentally, terribly mentally, a lot of times. But as a family, we've been very open about that. We've been open about the struggles that's brought to our door, and we get good days and you get bad days, but we try to support each other. But the come back to your question is, it's about, for us as a family, it's about just being open, knowing what you need to do, being open about what you need to do, and making sure that both myself and my wife are there. They want to come and talk to us because they think they found something. Come and talk to us, or go to the GP. Don't sit on it.
No, it's
Because
the
you
best way
look
to
at the
be.
stats today. Yeah. I mean, the stats today are going to show you. I mean, we got 3 boys, so the odds are there that one of them may well travel that path.
Yeah, and it's something again, like when you look at, there are obviously big charities out there or scientific groups who kind of looking at testicular cancer, but I think it's still not quite back in the zeitgeist as it once was. Like you'll be the same as me, and I talk about this every time. When Lance Armstrong had it, it was this massive big deal, and then it all went away. And I think and hope that the more that we can get out there and speak to schools, businesses, do the podcast, raise awareness and other activities, doing your runs and your social media presence, hopefully, we can get testicular cancer back and have those a little bit more money pumped into the science of it, to look at that and go, right, okay, is there this, it's just this, it seems to be, it's just it could be genetic and it could be hereditary. Okay, but, let's put the science in to know for sure. And I think, what we're both doing and the way that we're doing it can hopefully raise that bar a little bit,
And I think if there's any time to get that done, now I think is the time where we are probably more open and more receptive to be able to get that done. Yeah, we've made huge leaps, huge strides in, other diagnosis and being very open about those. I'm constantly having conversations with colleagues and friends who are very open about ADHD diagnosis. 5 years ago, that wasn't even a conversation that was on the radar. We now have quite a lot of conversation around mental health challenges, and that's still not where it needs to be. It's a long way from where it needs to be, but we're having those conversations. Go back 5, 6, 7 years, we weren't having those conversations. So I think if there's a time, if there's a springboard to bring testicular cancer back into the conversation, it's right now. But it does need, the likes of the Lancers to bring it to the published consciousness, because as we've seen with other types of cancers, when you've had, I mean, we've got the Princess of Wales, and I am, grateful. I'm not sure that's the right word, but I think I am inspired that she was open enough to talk about it. And we don't know everything we need to know, or would like to know, but we know enough that there is something there, and she's been open about talking about cancer and some of the challenges going through that. And I think that's what it needs sometimes. We need those people that are in the spotlight, in the limelight, to join us on this journey and say, yeah, do you know what? This is an important thing to talk about. You talk about your football talking in the clubs, which I think is fantastic. Naturally for me, any ball sport, we need to get involved in this, because we're going to have a lot of guys in there. They'll want to check, and you can create an awful lot of fun around that. A football team playing with their balls just screams great PR, doesn't it?
Oh, it
So
definitely
bring it
does.
into the consciousness, bring it back into the limelight, and bring it back into the research, because there is a lot of research going into cancer, but I don't think there's a lot going into specifically into testicular cancer. I don't think we're any further forward now than perhaps we were 10 years ago around understanding its causes.
Yeah. Andy, honestly, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me tonight. It's been an absolute privilege speaking to you, mate. Honestly, like, what an inspirational person you are. I think everything that I've seen that you do, not just for, you know, testicular cancer, but you as a human being and what you do for other causes is honestly, people we need more people like you in the world, mate. So thank you so much.
It really is my pleasure, and thank you for taking the time to invite me on here. As you know, and as you quite rightly see and say, I'm a huge advocate for talking about this, and I always will be.
And just to kind of sign off as well, like, is there anything that, you know, you would like to kind of put out there to anybody who's at any stage of their testicular cancer journey, or even any advice you wish that you had got when you were going through your treatment?
I think your first one is, as a well-known sporting brand would say, when it comes to checking, just do it.
Mm.
You know, don't put it off. And wherever you are on your journey, there are people that will make you feel comfortable. There will make you people that will keep you informed. And I appreciate, particularly for young men, there can be very much concerns around fertility and perhaps starting a family, because this is a young man's cancer. Typically, what are we, 15 to 35-year-olds is our average age group. Don't worry about it.
Mm.
Go and have those conversations, because modern science is phenomenal.
All right, no, thanks, mate.